And I would like to formally welcome Pablo to the Power BI Community Times in South Florida. And Pablo is a super experienced data scientist in fields such as financial markets, corporate finance, digital marketing, supply chains, operations, risk management, internal controls, internal audit, you name it, right? He is also a professor in Universidad Nacional de Ingeniería in Nicaragua. He's an instructor and also an author. We were discussing this before. He recently published a must-have book about the topic he's presenting today. Totally recommend it, and I will let him to tell you more about it. Thank you, Pablo. Super excited for your visit today, and this is absolutely a wanted presentation. When you are ready, please take it away and tell us more about yourself.
Well, thank you very much, Cecilia. I mean, it has been really overwhelming presentation. So I'm not an expert. I'm an enthusiast, as I like to say, because I'm constantly learning, and I don't consider myself an expert. So I'm constantly learning. So an expert is somebody that should know mostly everything. Maybe not everything, but mostly everything, which I have not. So. But anyway, thank you. I mean, I've been doing a lot of things in my life. I come from business and finance, as I was originally degreed as a business and finance professional. I've been doing a lot of things: internal audit, corporate finance, private equity, investments, stock market. More or less, as you said, you name it. I've been there, all related to it. So, but a few years ago, I had a middle-age crisis, let's call it like that. So, and I wanted to go back to what had made me really happy, which is working with numbers, statistics, and mathematics. So finance was not giving me nothing more exciting because I have done so much in my life in finance. So a few years ago, I decided to change career. So I started as a business intelligence developer with no prior experience whatsoever in business intelligence per se, but I had the experience in data analysis, of course, but just updating myself, acquiring the knowledge about databases and all of that, which I did, and later I jumped into the data science space, doing machine learning applications and artificial intelligence applications. I'm working for Dell right now. Dell computers, Dell Technologies, as it is now called, and also right now I'm a senior data scientist in the legal operations department. So I apply machine learning, artificial intelligence applications for legal, just facilitating the digital transformation for legal operations, all the attorneys and everything. Everything where Dell puts a signature. So basically, that's what we see, which is almost everything. Because of my passion with data and everything, I've been very much involved. Oh, my friend Walter is here. Okay, welcome, Walter. Because of my passion with data and everything, I became a Microsoft MVP 3 years ago now. In the category of data platform, with all the work that I did in Power BI, I also founded the Power BI Panama user group, which is very active in the region and is growing really well. And because I'm now based in Austin, Texas, in the US, due to my work, I still run the Panama user group, of course, but I also partner with some local user groups like the Houston user group, like the Austin user group, and now South Florida user group with you. So glad to be here. So expanding the horizons. So about the topic today, I want to talk about something that is not very much used today in Power BI or within the Power BI community users, which is how to use R and Python in Power BI and some practical cases, what you can do with that. So I know that most of the Power BI users, I know that because I'm one of them, I was one of them, are business people, are business analysts, that you have your, I see another familiar faces here, so that's great. I see Bernadette coming up. Okay, so I see that most of the users, when they hear about R and Python, They are programming languages. So they are programming languages. So I know that many people eventually get a little bit scared about, well, to use R and Python, you need to be a developer, a software developer, a programmer, or coder, or something like that. That is not exactly true. I mean, obviously, you need to have some coding skills. That's true, but you don't need to be a software engineer to use R and Python. And I know that because I'm one of them. I am not a software engineer or IT person at all. So I'm going to show you with the right selective skills in R and Python, a few samples of some crazy things that you can do that you couldn't do before using Power BI. So if you allow me, Cecilia, I'm going to share my screen.
Yes, go ahead.
Okay. So the screen here. You see my screen?
Correct.
Okay, wonderful. Excellent. So this is a Power BI. So first of all, let's understand why using Power BI or using R in Python with Power BI. I like to illustrate this with a very simple picture like this. I mean, normally we use Power BI, or the traditional use of Power BI is just to understand what happened in the past and why things happened why things happened in the past with data. So when you start aggregating data, this is what you're seeing here is just a very simple chart about the analytics maturity process in any organization or even your personally. So in the beginning, when we have a bunch of data, we clean the data, we prepare, we aggregate the data and consolidate it into standard reports. We understand every report that you have is basically is a vision towards the past, just for you to understand what happened in the past. So and once you start aggregating more and more reports, your data storage becomes more complex. You need to scale that up. Therefore, you start using more complex databases, schemas, and systems and architecture. You move into the OLAP or perhaps some cubes or data within the data warehouse. But all of that, again, is just storing data for you to understand what happened in the past. Still, Power BI is fantastic for all of that. When you start aggregating and iterating the analysis of your usual standard reports, and then what happens is, after looking at the same report over and over and over again, you start identifying some patterns. So very simple case, when you have a sales report, you identify there are certain moments across the year where you have some peaks or some downs, etc. And you start identifying some patterns. Oh, this is maybe holiday season, this is Christmas season, whatever it is, and that has an impact on your sales report. When you start identifying those patterns and also identifying, you start digging into why all those patterns are happening. Of course, in general terms, the human guessing is very easy to identify why the patterns are happening. Oh, because it's Christmas season. Fine, that's a very generic assumption. So let's make a very specific assumption. Why my sales peaks regularly during Christmas season? Because and then you start digging into the details and say, oh, it's because I have more number of customers, or because I have the same number of customers that purchase more items, for example. So when you're digging into that level of detail, this is where you're going into the area of business intelligence. Business intelligence is not only the ability to work with databases. That's the technical side of business intelligence. In terms of analysis, business intelligence is about understanding the whys. When data answer questions about all the data, why my sales are peaking regularly on Christmas season? Is because I have more customers, or because I have the same number of customers who purchases more items, or even both? So, and then you can start digging into those details and understand the whys. Again, Power BI is fantastic for that. So you're using Power BI for, I mean, obviously, but just keep it in the context. You're using Power BI to understand what happened in the past and why it happened still in the past. So using Power BI with R and Python, those programming languages, and you can start using following the same maturity process, analytics, data analytics maturity process. You can start measuring those patterns. So every time I have an extra number of if my customer visits my shops 10%, I mean, I have an increase of 10% in my customer, that means 8% in my revenue growth. When my prices goes up 5%, my revenue decreases 8%. For example, no? So what you're doing basically is you're measuring those patterns. So if you make the assumption of once you measure those patterns and you can create like a relationship, a numerical relationship between the patterns, obviously with some margin or estimation of values, what you're doing is basically projected to the future what happened in the past. So why is it important for us to understand what can happen in the past, which is the area of data science and machine learning. In other words, predictive analytics and machine learning. So imagine this: if you know if your business is going to have is estimated to have okay, not predicting. This is not a crystal ball. Okay, this is not a crystal ball. This is an estimation. This is a statistical analysis. We can estimate if everything remains the same, if all the historical conditions remains the same as we had in the past, we can estimate that the future sales are going to be in this range, between this and this range. Okay, if you know that ahead of time, you will know how much do you have to invest in inventories. You will know how much can you expect in your cash flows. You will know how much people, how many resources you need to hire or not in the future in order for you to adapt the future state to your current situation. So in other words, you're improving your data, your decision-making process if you can estimate what is the most likely event to happen in the future. Okay. Well, this is exactly what R and Python are designed for. So especially when they're combined with Power BI, I call it the two superpowers, the two extra superpowers that you can use in Power BI. They are the superpowers in Power BI. So in other words, by using R and Python in Power BI, you don't need to only see what happened in the past, but you can also estimate what is the most likely event to happen in the future. And this is what we're going to see some samples about. Okay. Before going into that, before going into R and Python and so forth, let's understand some considerations about how to use and how to work with R and Python. By the way, you can interrupt me anytime. I love to interact with the audience. So just if you have any question, if you have something to say, if you want to make any comment, just post it on the chat or just open your mic and let me know. I love the interaction with people. Don't wait for me to go to the very end, especially because I tend to speak too much and you're going to be really bored here. So going back to the presentation, let's understand some considerations of working with R and Python into Power BI, and it's applicable to both languages. Okay. So the first consideration, I call it consideration or limitations. I mean, understand that this is an external tool. Power BI is an external tool with R and Python. They are isolated environments. What Dell equipment do you recommend to work with Power BI? Man, Fernando, Dell or not Dell? If you're using a laptop, as I said, Dell or not Dell. At least 16 gigas of RAM for sure, and an i7 core 11th or 10th, 11th generation works really well. But it's going to depend on what are your needs. But I mean, the bigger the memory, the better. I personally have a 32 gigabytes XPS laptop, and it's working really fast and really well. But I mean. The documentation says minimum 8 gigas RAM, but I think that 8 gigas is too small. Maybe 16 gigas is much better, at least. Optimal 32, even 64. Just if you run really heavy stuff, 64 gig RAM is a good one. Anyway, going back to this presentation, visualizations. I mean, one of the first limitation or consideration to work with Power BI and R. First of all, before going into that, you can use R and Python in two places in Power BI. You can use it either in Power BI desktop for visualization, or you can use it in Power Query, okay, for data transformation. You can use it in those two spaces. And remember that if you are a user of Power BI, those two environments are completely isolated. What happens in desktop has nothing to do with what happens in Power Query. What happens in Power Query has nothing to do with what happens in Power BI desktop. Okay, so with that in mind, let's start with visualizations. Okay, you can use R and Python for visualization. We're going to do some samples, so you will understand what you can do with visualization. You may think, why do I need to visualize with R and Python? Power BI is very good with visualization already. Yes, but you can do a lot more. Even more that you cannot do today, I think, with Charticulator. Charticulator is a fantastic addition to Power BI. Anyway, visualizations are limited to 150,000 rows. We call it in the groups of people that we use it, the 150K limit. Yes, this is something that has been designed by Microsoft. Nothing we can do about it. Okay, so if you have a data set that it has more than 150,000 rows, it's going to be shopped when you populate the visual in the canvas. So a recommendation that I can say is populate filters beforehand before you populate the visual. So before you are going to run the visual, if your data set has over 150,000 rows, for that visual with R and Python, not for any other, but for that visual developed in R and Python, try to use some slicers, some filters, or something that can create a filter context to reduce the amount of rows. Then you will know that you're seeing all the data at once. Second consideration is Power BI desktop. Again, we're still in desktop, not in Power Query. We will take care of Power Query later. Oh, by the way, now that I'm mentioning Power Query, that limitation of 150,000 rows does not exist in Power Query. I've been able to upload and import more than 4 million rows in Power Query using R. So that limitation doesn't exist in Power Query. Going back to the desktop, keep in mind that Power BI by default, and this is something that you and I cannot do about it, by default removes duplicate rows, I mean, for visualization again, of course. So you may think, well, I don't need to worry about duplicated work. I mean, think about this scenario. Imagine that you are doing analysis of sales transaction or a snapshot of a fact table where you have a lot of transactions. Imagine that you have the same transaction by two customers, both at the same time for the same product. It can happen. So if you don't have a unique identifier of each transaction, Power BI is going to remove one of the lines because they are duplicated. Okay, so my recommendation is always good to have a unique identifier for each line. So before populating something, and only if you know there are duplicated rows, eventually, create an index column, a custom column with an index, and then you put every row will be different, so no row will be removed. The third one is something that it was very important in the past. Right now is something that has been improved. Power Query is a feature in Power BI desktop for sure. Yes, yes. I'll show you what I mean by that, Paula. I'll show you about that. But yes, there is Power Query always in desktop for sure. So I'll show you why. So the third consideration, column titles must be clean. So I mean, we usually have column titles with spaces between words, for example, or with the hashtags or the dollar signs, or sometimes a row. I mean, I have seen crazy stuff everywhere. So when you're working with R and Python, it's very important that you remove every single special character, even remove the space among words. Okay, remove it. Okay, if you need to have, because it's better readable, if you need to have a column title with multiple words, my recommendation is do it as you want, but maybe use the underscore, okay, between words, so then you will have all one word, okay, no space between words, and you are not using any special character, because those characters in the code in R and Python can be considered special functions, and that can give you a lot of trouble. And I have seen many things, many troubles and many errors in other colleagues, and you can go a little bit crazy just understanding where the hell is the code giving you the error. Okay, so good advice, column titles must be as clean as possible. Okay, so every single data set, and this is something that comes by default, every single data set is loaded as a data frame and is called data set. No matter how your data, your table data or your data is called, your table, sales report for November, I don't know, but it doesn't matter. When you open the script for R and Python, it's called data set. That's what it is. We have no choice. Recommendation, and this is something that is a good practice. We all reuse. I mean, I think that everybody that works in this industry, the absolute best thing that we do is copy and paste, including myself. I'm not gonna renege. So when you're reusing any code that comes from any other source, websites or blogs or your own RStudio, your own Jupyter notebook or whatever it is, doesn't matter. If you're going to be working in data into Power BI, you can either adapt the code or include one extra line of code renaming your dataset. That's the other consideration. The other thing is, imagine that if you're doing visualization using R and Python, if you're going to publish that Power BI report to the service, and that Power BI report contains R or Python code in visualization, okay, you need a pro license or above or higher, okay? It's not gonna work with a basic free license. You need a pro license, but again, if you're publishing visuals to the service, only there, okay? This license is not required, so is not required when you're using R and Python scripts running in Power Query, and this is very important and very cool at the same time. I'll show you a few examples of what you can do with R and Python scripts running in Power Query. You can publish to a service. You can publish to the service with a free base license. You don't need extra licenses for that, and you can run code in your Power Query. However, if you are using scripts of R and Python running in Power Query and you are publishing to the Power BI service, you need a gateway in personal mode. No gateways in enterprise mode or private mode. And the other thing is, if you're using R as Python script running in Power Query, your data set, okay, your tables that you're using where you're executing the code, the R Python scripts, must be set to public, okay, not to private. Because the reason for that, all these three considerations, the reasons for that is because Power Query is calling your local machine where your engine for either R or Python is installed. So it's treating the execution of the script like an external code and is using Power BI like a shell, okay, inside of it, like a capsule or container, I don't know how to call it. So what the engine does from the Power BI service is going to your local machine, is using your personal credentials, and you can imagine your machine has to be up and running for that, okay? Executing the code in your local machine, and the result of that code is going back to through the gateway to the Power BI service. Okay, that's why the service requires a personal mode gateway and your data set must be set to public. Okay, that's what it is. Okay, after the considerations, so let's do some examples. Let's start first with R, and then we'll take about some Python. Any questions so far? Everybody good? Everybody understood everything that has been said so far? Okay. Let's go. Understood. Okay, thank you, Nicholas. Let's do some examples of visualization using R. Okay, this is a visual using R. So to activate the visualization either in R or Python, you have those little icons here in the visualization pane. You have the R script visual or the Python script visual. I'm not going to execute anything because I don't want to waste any time here, and I can be waiting to the code to be executed. But I'll show you some coding example. Pedro, how can you share an R visual if you need to have running locally? What do you mean by share an R visual? You mean in the desktop when you publish it, or how does it work? Can you expand a little bit more, Pedro? Can you open the mic? A visual created in R, yes. Okay, well, as I said, when you create a visual or either in R or Python in your desktop and you publish it to the service, it is required a Pro or Enterprise license to be able to render the visual in the service. Once it's there, you can share it. Like any other visual in Power BI via app or via link or whatever you want. But you're not sharing the visual; you're sharing the report itself. But the rendering of the visual, it's happening in Azure, and to do that, it is required a Pro or Enterprise license. So is shared like another visual.
I'm thinking that maybe the confusion is because of the gateway that has to be in personal mode.
Yeah,
but that is more
two things.
about refresh.
Yeah. The gateway is only the gateway in personal mode is only for execution in Power Query. That's all, but not for the visuals. That maybe is the confusion. If that helps. Okay. Okay.
And
thank you.
You have a question from Bukari. You can unmute if you wish.
Yes. Hello, Paulo. I would like to ask a question because I'm not sure I understood what you said your previous presentation. What thing I would like to know, if we have to use Python or R in look with Power Query. You said we have to if we have to use it, we have to make your publication in we have to use in to do it in public set. What thing I would like to know, is it necessary to have a professional license to do that?
No, you can do it. You can do if it's running in Power Query. You don't need any Pro license. You can use the basic free license from Power BI. Okay. If it's running in Power Query, if it's running on the visual in the desktop, you need a Pro or Enterprise license.
Okay, fine.
Okay, good, excellent, excellent, good. Yeah, I know that is confusing, but because there are two different environments, as I said, and they're isolated. So, but it has its particularities. Anyway, so this is an example of a scatter chart with a regression, a polynomial regression. In this case, in a visual. So if I click here, okay, you are going to see. Come on, yeah, you're going to see the code, okay, the R code that is generated behind the scene. So this code, okay, is what is creating this visual. What is beautiful about this is interesting. I mean, it's beautiful. Yeah, it's beautiful. It's helpful because this visual, okay, this visual can be filtered, okay, with when I, for example, let's put no. Let me add a new slicer here. I will put, for example, this one here. I don't know what it is, but I don't care. So I can slice and dice the data. And as you can see here on the top, okay, the script is running. The script is running and is filtering the data set. Okay, the data set that is here, okay, is being filtered with my filter selection, my slicer, and that is re-executing the code with the new filtered data set, which, as I said, is called data set by default. I cannot change this, it comes by default. And second, every single data set is, it must contain unique lines. We cannot change this, it is what it is. Okay, so all this code is what we are executing behind the scene. Okay. So, however, the visuals respond from the filter context against the visual, but if I select the visual itself, nothing gets filtered out. So the filter context works in only one direction, but not from the visual if it's created in R Python towards the rest of the elements as we understand it, as we know that it works usually in Power BI. Okay, this is an example. This is something that you cannot do today with Power BI. I mean, this is a regression, but you can do many more things. For example, you can do a correlation. There is a visual already for correlation analysis, but you don't have these fancy charts. Doing correlation as slice and dice by both continuous and categorical features, that it gives you more insights about your data when once it's sliced and diced, for example. Or you cannot do, for example, a combined correlogram with multiple correlation analysis with multiple channels. Oh, there's a big noise behind. Oh, much better now. So it happens. I mean, you can do again a big number of visualizations that you cannot do with regularly with Power BI with the usual visualization or tiles that you have in Power BI. This is again done with R. So this is another example of R combined or complex analysis. So we have this is a marginal diagram, okay, a marginal chart. Okay, this is all, again, this is all happening in visualization. There is a lot of examples about this, okay? So, but this is on the visualization, but what happens if we use, for example, R in Power Query? Okay, let me just put you an example of another thing that I have. Okay, in this case, for example, I'm using a standard line visual, okay, and this is a time series. In fact, this is the stock shares from Microsoft, which I pulled from 2016 down to 2021, March 2021. We can see that Microsoft has been doing really well, really well. Okay, so I wanted to do some forecasting. Okay, I wanted to do some forecasting ahead of time. So from March up to I did August 31st. Okay, so I did August 31st. So I know that you the line charts in Power BI already have here the forecast analysis. Okay, this is an exponential smooth model to do forecasting, but this exponential smooth is recommended when you are doing short-term analysis. Short-term is a complex matter that I'm not going to explain right now what is short-term, what is long-term, but how can we import into our data model the forecast? Because if it's here in our data model, okay, we can use this forecasted data to do DAX analysis, for example, something that you cannot do today with this forecast option here in your line chart. So, well, to do that is fantastic when you use R or Python in the Power Query script. This is Power Query, okay? So if we go to Power Query, oh, sorry, I have because I changed the settings. Okay, so this is the data set. Okay, this is the data set, the original data set. I only have two columns: date and the share value of Microsoft, okay, per day. So that's all I have. And what I want to do is use a predictive forecast model in R. In this case, it's a Prophet. It's called Prophet, a package Prophet, which is what's designed by Facebook, by the way. And I'm using that Prophet model into my data set in Power Query, who's going to run locally an algorithm, okay, who's going to create a model, and that model will populate forward my data points, okay? So here is the script. Yes. And here is the script. You can see only 4 lines of code, 4 lines of code. You don't need to be a software developer for this, okay? You need to understand what is the model, what is a data set, how it works, what are the parameters, just few things. I mean, it's just 1 page, that's all in text, okay? And these 4 lines, produces, I mean, is in here because I am not, yeah, let's run it. Let's run it. What it does, it produces, actually, let me just stop it here, otherwise this is gonna take forever. If we go to the data set, let me show you. What it produces is the forecast, okay? The forecast for the next 180 points, okay? This is the forecast. What is that? Sorry, in this one here. Okay, don't be scared for all these columns because this is all part of the result of the model that is being used. Okay, so if we go, remember that my data was going up to March, so you can see this is my model forecasting every individual data point until August 31st. Okay, so and once this is in my data model, I can apply DAX, I can apply time intelligence, and of course I can populate it in any chart like this in Power BI as we normally do. So that's the beauty of that. So I can do an extra analysis that I couldn't, okay, if it was in a visualization. Because it is also executed in Power Query, I insist you don't need any other license, just the basic free license, because that code is being executed into Power Query. It's not a visualization. It's not a Python or R visualization here in the desktop. Okay, this is an example of what you can do when you are using R, for example, to do forecasting. Okay, let's do now some examples about Python. Okay, with Python you can do also great stuff. Okay, here I have a sample here, which I personally like, which is a geospatial analysis using clustering. Okay, so I have a case where it's loading because it has a lot of data points. I have 117,000 rows in this case. I mean, I can have more because I'm going to execute an algorithm against this data set. This data set is a used vehicles data set where I have multiple features about each and every one of the cars that I am using. Okay, so what I want to do is first I want to locate, and I also have the latitude and the longitude. So I have the geospatial location of that each car. So what I want to do here is basically group all the cars that has similar features. I mean, you can think, well, I can do that very easily. I can select all the cars that has these 4 cylinders, or they are all gas, and etc. That's okay when you have some features or some columns like this. I'll show you how to get the R script on Query Editor. Yeah, I'll show you in a minute, Raymond. So, but when you have a bunch of features like this, a lot of features, how do you determine the similarities between all the cars? For example, all your data points. So, for that reason, why we have in Power Query the execution of Python in this case. So, if we go to Power Query, okay, this is my original data set, okay. So I have my source. It's just a very simple CSV file. As you can see here, it's a simple CSV file. I do the basic transformation, headers promoted, that's okay. And then I execute a Python script, okay? A Python script is executed. You can see 2 lines of code, two lines of code. So that Python script, okay, produces a new column that is added to my original dataset, just one new column that is going to tell me, this one here, which cluster belongs each car to. Okay, in this case, I have 5 clusters from 0 to 4, 0, 1, 2, 3, 4. Okay, so I have 5 clusters. How to insert a Python or R script? So to insert an R or Python script in Power Query Editor, all you have to do is go to transform, okay, and you have here those 2 buttons. So you can insert here an R script. So whatever, library, lo que sea, whatever, okay, and you run the script exactly the same as you saw in the previous example, or you can do the same. You can insert here a Python script. You know, another beautiful thing about working with R and Python in Power Query is you can mix languages in the same project, okay? There's nothing wrong. If I executed a Python script here, I can now execute an R script here, and it's going to work exactly the same, depending on what's the purpose of the script. But I can mix the 2 languages, which is fantastic for people like me that likes to do crazy stuff, for example. But it's very nice because Python is very good in few things, R is very good in other few things. So there is no conflict. And I'm not going to enter into that discussion that we have every single day. Which one is better, R or Python? I say both, because Python is very good for something, R is very good for something else. So you need to understand both. So yeah, that's very cool. So R, for example, is fantastic for data transformation and data analysis when you're doing really complex transformation, which I mean, Power Query handles really well transformation, but sometimes to do one thing in Power Query, you're required to do 10 steps. Well, there are functions in R that is only just one word, and you just apply the function against the data set, and it transforms exactly what you need. It's really helpful. And then once you have changed or transformed your data using R, you can apply a model, for example, using Python. That's very fantastic, absolutely beautiful. So in this case, as I said, going back to the example, sorry, as you can see, I tend to speak too much. So going back to the sample, what I did was to cluster, not now, thank you. Okay, so I cluster every single car into the 5 clusters, okay? Yeah, there are plenty of common sources to find those functions, yes, absolutely. So we have those clusters, and because they are now in my data model, I can actually populate them. And this is how it looks like, okay? So as you can see, every color is a cluster, and I want to understand where are the centroids, what are the center points of my clusters. I mean, I'm just bringing a ton of data. That's why it's a bit slow here right now, and it's demanding a lot of visual power. So I want to understand what are my centroids. The centroids are the central point of each cluster. Okay, so what I did is create the average location, latitude and longitude for every cluster. This is a very simple thing to do. A very simple thing. The average latitude and longitude for every of the clusters, because I already have the cluster populated, created in a new table. Okay, and now I go to my second map, for example. This is all happening in Power Query. There's nothing fancy on R or Python Visual. This is all Power Query. So, for example, I have now the clusters. Cluster is the central point for all my points in the map, so where are located all the cars. So in this case, imagine that if I am a garage company or a mechanical company, car mechanical company, and I want to open several garages location to do services to my customers. Okay, where will be the best locations where I can serve faster all my customers? Well, actually that's the centroids. So by calculating the centroids, the model itself is actually telling me where are the ideal locations to serve my customer, where to put my garages. So you can see all the cars spread all over the place here in this map. You see renders. You have hundreds of points here. Okay, what are the best locations to serve all those cars? Where are located my customers? Well, actually, that's the centroid. That's those points. So this is telling me And I can slice and dice, I can slow down. Okay, so this location, oh, this location, I mean, I didn't select it, the machine itself did. So it says that Charlottesville here in this location is the central location for all the cluster, for all the cars that are in this area in the east coast of United States. Seems like there are two groups, but they're overlapping together here. So maybe I can avoid to have two locations here. I can have one location with more equipment, so I can serve both type of cars. And I have another location, another ideal location, which is here in Nevada, okay, because it's the closest or the central point closer to most of my cars in the West Coast. Fine, because now it's not only in the West Coast, but I also have cars in the Southwest, Northwest, etc. So all of that is calculated automatically. Gabriel, yes, this all required. Oh, thank you very much. Angel, yes, you need to have installed Python in your local computer to run either R or Python. Thank you, Gabriel, for answering. Gabriel is my colleague, the co-author of the book that we just developed. Yes, and that's it. This is an example of how to use R and Python into Power BI. Okay. If you're interested, because there is not much literature out there, if you're interested, we have created, Gabriel and I, it's Gabriel Gomez and myself, we have created the only book that we know so far that exists that is called Machine Learning in Power BI with R and Python. The Spanish version it has been released 1 week ago, just 1 week ago. And the English version is planned to be launched to the public in October, November this year. So if you want to take a look, let me just share with you this link so you can have an idea of at least the content of the book that you're going to see. So you have a description, and then you have the table of contents. Everything is here. How to use R, multiple cases of how to use cars. I don't know if you knew that, but you know that you regularly don't, but you cannot export or write back your data once from Power BI back to your data source. In normal cases, you cannot write back. Well, there is a way. Actually, you can write back your data once your model has been transformed, for example, or exported or something. You can write back your data to the data source. It doesn't matter if it's a database or something, but to do that you can use R, and it's a very simple process. So you have a lot of nice tips and tricks here in this book that you can find. How to implement linear regression, logistic regression, how to do complex calculation, all those visuals that we see, and many more. You can implement, for example, how to do. Oh, it's not here. We need to update. We also added recently. Thank you, everybody. Thank you, Bernadette, or Bukari, Matt. Thank you very much, Cecilia. Thank you. Yeah, this is the effort of 2 years working on this. But you can actually implement a neural network into your data using very simple code into your Power Query, and it's going to cost you nothing because R and Python are open source, are free to use it, and because we are using all this into Power Query, it's not going to cost you nothing. You don't need to have any extra license for you to export and publish your analytical reports, your advanced analytical reports into the service. Thank you, Walter. Thank you, Mark. Okay. Yeah, and also in Python, you have a bunch of cases where you can do regression analysis with multiple applications. Because we come from the business, my partner and myself, we're not a software developer. Well, my partner is, Gabriel is a software developer. I am not. But we also understood that you cannot learn this just as it was a coding language book. I mean, it's not a book about software. It's a book about how to use R and Python into Power BI. So we wrote the book, and the book has over 85 practical cases explained one by one from zero to development and to publish. Every single thing that you have seen here and much, much more is sold in the book. You have natural language processing. I'm not trying to sell the book. I'm just, yes, I mean, Cecilia asked me about the book, so I'm just sharing the content with you. You have natural language processing, and you have a ton of transformation with this. You also have sentiment analysis, and you also have a framework on how to implement any application of machine learning into a project, into your analysis. So all of that is here, and of course, anything that you may need is always. We include also our contact details here, if in case you need to be in contact with us, because we know many people are facing challenges when implementing the code, that they don't know how to interpret an error, an issue, etc., etc. So you can contact us anytime, so we can help you. This book is not yet in Amazon. It's not in Amazon. We sell it. Independently because we invest over 30% of our revenue. 30% of our revenue. It's not 5%. It's 30%. It's a huge chunk of revenue. We invested into paid tuitions for people to do or receive education about business intelligence and data science, and also we dedicate 10% of our revenue to develop or open source applications, so they can continue being free and open to be used by anybody. Wilson, with the advent of impact retail e-commerce historic data by the COVID pandemic to the future data points based on the new practices, behavior and restriction, how can you accommodate that? Oh, that's a fantastic question, Wilson. That's a fantastic question. And that's actually my day-to-day thing. So, and it could be a separate discussion. But what I do is, what I normally do is, everything prior pandemic, I don't include it into a model. I don't include it. I just work with what happened in the pandemic, because remember that a model is just learning from past history. So it's iterating a data set, historical data set, in order to identify what are the patterns in your data and populate it forward. That's what a model does. It's not crystal ball. It's just statistics, purely statistics. So if you use pre-pandemic data, make sure that that data is not going to give you a prediction. It's going to give you a trend, okay? But it's not a prediction. It's a trend, even though you see that on the future, populated on the future. The reality is that pandemic situation, or from the pandemic to date, we have to use a different model. We have to revisit the model. Well, what I normally do, I compare the model with historical pre-pandemic situation, and I compare that against a model only with pandemic data. Obviously, because you have a lot less data during pandemic, we only have 1 year and a half, roughly, more or less 1 year and a half. Unfortunately, too long, but it's all that we have. Most that we can do is populate forward 2 months, because we don't know what's going to happen next. So sometimes you work with what you have, and with 1 year history data, we cannot populate the next 3 years. It's impossible. I mean, it's possible, but it's not very recommended, because again, it's not a crystal ball. Nick, if it includes those sources for Common R and Python, for absolutely, like Nick, it does includes the common sources, all the functions, all the code is there. Actually, let me show you a sample of the book itself. I have it here. 1 second. I have it here. Come on. I have a bunch of things. This is the book. Okay, this is the book. Yeah, it's you can see the size next to me, right? It's an A4 size book. It's a big one. It's a big one. Texas size. What can I say? I live in Texas. And also, you can see the book. It's full color. It's not black and white. It's full color. Yeah, Texas size. Full color, A4. Yes. Oh, thank you, Cecilia. You shared the location, the site for the Spanish version. Yeah.
Is that the correct one?
It is the correct one. Yes, that's the site that I use for the Spanish version. Yeah. Yeah. And that's all. That's all my presentation for today, Cecilia. I don't want to bore anybody here.
Amazing. Thank you so much. I don't think anyone is bored. Let's open for questions.
Sure.
Anyone using currently Python or R in Power BI or thinking about it? Or do you have any struggle? People are thinking the questions.
Oh yeah, somebody asked for my LinkedIn. Yeah, 1 second.
Yeah, Lino.
Yes.
Lino from Peru.
Yes, Lino.
So, okay, I have a question. How did you open the R editor in Power BI? I kind of miss it because, and the other question is, so I can use Power BI as an R editor. Is that right? Or I just have to run the code in R and then I just can integrate it?
I see. Okay. Yeah. No, you can use the R editor in Power BI as it was mentioned at the beginning. There are 2 locations where you can open either R or Python scripts to do the editing. One is here in the visualization. So you can create a visualization here. Okay, you enable this, and then you have the editor here. To activate the editor, you need to add the fields first. Okay, so you add the fields. Okay, you add the fields, whatever, okay, and then you get activated the visual, because this visual is activated because once you add the fields in the visual, the Power BI creates automatically your data frame object, which is a data set, okay, which is a data set containing the fields that you're using. Then you can use the code here, library, whatever, ggplot, and etc. So, and you do everything else that you need. The same works exactly for Python, exactly the same. So, but this is all to create visuals, okay? If you want to use Power Query for editing an existing data frame or an existing data set, or even import a new data set from Power Query using R or Python, because you can go to data to Power Query, the Power Query environment, go to transform, and you just open the script. Right now, this script that you open here is going to be applying your selected data set, okay, your selected data set. But if you want to do a new script, what you do is go to new source, okay, and open your R or Python script from the source. This is still Power Query, okay, so R script. And in here, you can import a new data set. You can import here. So, and in here, you don't have the restriction of a data set, named data set. So you can import whatever you want. So, and you can do all your transformation, library, tidyverse, and then blah, 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 whatever you need to do. Okay, so you have 2 locations where to import where to use your script, either for Python or R. Power BI Desktop only for visuals, or Power Query for importing and or transforming data. Yeah, or wrangling data. Yes, right on. Thank you. These are your 2 locations to input data. Okay. We use R for correlation analysis. Very good, Kevin. There is plenty of analysis on correlation that is important to understand, and it gives a lot of insights. How do you feel now about starting? Are you asking me? Or
no. I was answering Nick.
Okay, yeah. Yeah, Ramon, I use R to wrangle data. It's fantastic. R for wrangling data is fantastic. Yes, from the refresh report. Could I instead use R for within Power BI to import and wrangle and refresh report automatically? You can, certainly you can. For automation or refreshing or automation the refresh of report, I suggest that you do outside from the PowerShell. You can call R from the PowerShell and And you can automate the refresh on that if you want. You can do that. I don't recommend refreshing automatically from Power Query itself, but that's another side. But you can do. Can you import Jupyter notebooks from GitHub of other IDE? Import the notebook itself into Power BI? Not today. Not today. Not today. It was a possibility in the past, but Microsoft shut it down for security reasons, but not today. Okay. Once I can get the book, I feel at ease. Okay, thank you, Nick.